This week, everything you need to know about Catalina. Catalina was founded by a young entrepreneur named Frank Butler. Frank and Catalina Yachts both have pretty interesting stories that I think are worth talking about. Frank Butler was born in California in 1928 and joined the Navy as a teenager. As a young entrepreneur, he founded his first business, a machine shop called Wesco Tool. Pay attention to the term Wesco here because that actually gets used a few times in Frank's life. At Wesco Tool, he made airplane parts of all things, and in the late 1950s he got his first taste of sailing in sailing dinghies, which is sort of where most of us start, isn't it? Frank actually comments later on that he was sad that he didn't get into sailing until he was almost in his 30s, but eventually he did, and, history is history. Frank had a few boats throughout his adolescent years, but when Frank started a family, he actually wanted a bigger boat. I mean, don't we all? But you couldn't just buy a bigger sailboat off the rack in 1959 when he wanted one, so he actually contacted a boat builder to build him something more suitable to his family's needs, which seems reasonable, but at the time it wasn't. In building the boat, the builder actually ran out of money, and Frank loaned him on a personal loan more money, but still the boat was never completed. This is where history gets a bit shaky. On some accounts, Frank complained, and unable to finish the boat or pay back the loan, the builder agreed to give Frank the mold for the boat and all the designs. Other accounts of history say that because the builder couldn't finish the boat or pay back the loan, the builder disappeared, like fled the country sort of disappeared, and Frank actually forcefully took over the factory and the staff. Either way, no matter which account of history, Frank was now able to finish his own boat. I mean, why not? Now finding himself in the boat business, entrepreneur Frank founded his own company again, this time called Wesco Marine. So there's Wesco again. Soon after, Frank changed the name of Wesco Marine to Coronado Yachts, building at first the Victory 21 and the 14-foot Super Satellite, which was surely a name reminiscent of the times. Frank's first notable design of his own making was the Coronado 25, which incorporated a lot of his own knowledge from his time making airplane parts. When 1968 eventually rolled around, Frank sold his baby Coronado Yachts to the Whitaker Company, and this is sort of where it gets interesting. Whitaker was sort of a conglomerate of companies making everything from sailboats, aerospace parts, metal, chemicals. They even had dealings in the healthcare industry. On a personal side note of the Whitaker sort of thing, Whitaker acquired Columbia Yachts, which originally built the Sparkmans and Stevens designed North Star 1500. Columbia itself was later bought by Hughes Boat Works after Whitaker had owned it. And Hughes Boat Works turned that North Star 1500 into the Hughes 35, which is what I currently cruise on, Lady K. So that's a pretty cool connection for me. But back to Frank. After selling Coronado to Whitaker, he stayed on with Whitaker for about a year, but left due to disagreements with management about making what he wanted to make, a 22-foot trailer sailor with a swing keel. They weren't really feeling it, so eventually Frank was out. For the next 2 years, Frank had a non-compete with Whitaker, so he stuck to smaller boats that wouldn't get him into legal trouble. When the non-compete ended, he built his own marina, and none other than Catalina Yachts. His first boat, you guessed it, a 22-foot trailer sailor that he wanted to build while he was at Whitaker. So go Frank, I think. By 1977, Frank had already designed the Catalina 25, 27, and the Catalina 30. Remember the Catalina connection to Columbia and Hughes and ultimately my boat? Well, now it gets even more interesting. In 1984, Catalina acquired the company called Morgan. Morgan is the famous go-anywhere center cockpit full keel boats. So when you see a Catalina/Morgan, this is why. Catalina then actually got into catamarans with their Narca and Prindle nameplates, and even a powerboat, the Islander 34, which they made from a mold they bought from Pearson. So now there's a Pearson sort of connection. Catalina also acquired the tooling for True North power boats and released a new model in 2020, which is now. Fast forward to present day, and you'll likely have at least one Catalina wherever you moor your boat. They've made over 60,000 boats at their production facilities in California and Florida. Today, Catalina is a staple in the sailing community, and like in the past episode where I talked about production boats, Catalina has sort of become very much one of those. They're very well laid out, very easy to sail, rife with luxury amenities. It's right in the groove with sort of Beneteau, Bavaria, and Hunter. Does that make it a bad boat? I don't think so. I mean, I've been spanked by my share of Catalinas in PHRF racing. They're quick. So where does that leave us with Catalina? If you're looking for an older boat to race on weekends, you'd be hard-pressed to beat a Catalina 27 or a Catalina 30. Any older Catalina in good shape is going to be akin to like a C&C as far as quality, speed, and roominess. I actually cruised with a Catalina 36 aft cabin model for a while, and I mean, this is down the eastern seaboard, and honestly, she was an amazing and very well-built boat. Very fast, very capable. For the 80s and 90s boats, you really can't go wrong with a Catalina. I'd be remiss if I talked about Catalina boats without talking about the dreaded Catalina smile. This is an issue with older Catalina boats before they actually became production boats. The Catalina smile is a crack in the fiberglass at the leading edge of the keel when the boat is viewed out of the water. The crack is caused by sagging and wear and tear on the hull to keel joint over time, and many, if not all, bolted-on keels from the 80s and 90s were sort of plagued with this problem. Doesn't mean the boat is bad or not worth buying. Usually just means the boat is showing its age. When presented with a boat with a Catalina smile or a crack in that glass keel to hull joint, there are a couple steps you can take to actually fix that. First and foremost, check the keel bolts. Signs of wear or corrosion on the keel bolts are always cause for alarm. Make sure the bolts are torqued to the manufacturer's specifications. Bad keel bolts are literally a nightmare to replace them, and it's definitely not a job for the faint of heart. If the keel bolts look bad, walk away. If the keel bolts look sound, however, you have to just repair the crack. And repairing that Catalina smile or the keel to hull crack on the outside, there's a few ways to do it. Some people swear by 5200, and that's fine. I don't have any experience on that route, but some other people will actually grind down the crack and repair it by filling it with thickened epoxy and then glassing over the crack. I'm of the epoxy glass camp, and on my own boat, Lady K, though she's not a Catalina, she actually did have that problem. She needed that repair. I checked the keel bolts and did my due diligence on that aspect. Everything was fine. So I made the repair by grinding out a groove in the keel to hull joint, actually removing the crack, going a few inches further than the crack, of course, to make sure that it couldn't progress. And then I filled it all with thickened epoxy and glassed over it with a couple layers of biaxial glass just for strength. The crack never came back, and we're years later now, and many, many hard groundings since I did that, and still no crack. So it is something that's fixable if you know that the keel bolts and all of that stuff are sound. So let's jump to the modern breed. You start to see the production boat of Catalinas sort of take influence. These newer boats are super comfortable. They employ lots of comforts like tankage, fridges and freezers, good heads, showers. Eventually, you actually start to see this modern cruiser come out of them. And I've personally toured and sailed on quite a few Catalinas, especially the Catalina 42, and to be honest, it's one of my favorite boats. The hull design, the sail plan, the interior layout, it's so well figured out that you'd really have to wrestle me away from buying a bigger boat of any other brand. Newer Catalinas don't seem to have the Catalina smile issue, and if you're looking at one, this is sort of the stuff you need to look at on the newer boats. These Catalinas are much like their counterparts from other brands, especially like with their comfort. They're capable cruisers. They take you in relative luxury from the coast of Florida down to Grenada and back. They'll do it safely, and if you mind the weather, even if you got caught out in a storm, they will actually get you and your family back to harbor safely. They're good boats. When you're looking at one of these newer boats, it's the same as the other newer boats, these production boats. You're looking for soft spots in the deck, anywhere around fittings or winches or anything that goes through the hull, through the deck. Delamination of any kind. You're looking for hull blisters, the tightness of the rudder, the condition of the rig and all the standing rigging. The other thing is the newer diesels, they tend to be of very high quality, but you'll want to watch for extensive engine hours. A newer Catalina may well have been to the Caribbean already. You may not know it, the seller may not tell you this, but they're very capable of going throughout the Caribbean. So depending on where it's located, it might have a lot of engine hours from motoring through the ICW or some canal somewhere. The bigger Catalinas employ much more complicated rigs as well. So if it's been traversing locks or canals, the owners of these boats tend to have the rig shipped on a truck instead of putting it on trusses on the deck. It just means a lot of engine hours in that case because you don't have the rig with you to put it up as soon as possible. With the more complex rig as well, with these newer production boats, especially Catalinas, you may not be able to step the rig yourself. So if you're used to stepping the rig up and down for winter or for canals or for whatever reason to inspect things, these rigs are a lot more complicated. And there's a good chance that the owners have had it professionally stepped, and you'll have to have it professionally stepped, which sort of indicates a little bit more cost where you might not have had that with your previous boat. Catalina owners also tend to be very happy with their boats. That's important to know. And part of that comes from how Catalina treats its customers. Calling the head office of Catalina, the phone system actually has a button, an option, press 1, press 2, press 3. They actually have an option to talk to Frank, the founder. Frank has made himself available on countless occasions over the years, and that speaks volumes to the brand and how it's managed and how it views its client base. Many Catalina owners over the years have talked to Frank, the founder, the owner, who's still at the tiller of the whole company. So I think that's an important thing. If you want to talk to the owner of Beneteau or Hunter or any other brand, I mean, good luck. But you can still talk to Frank if you want to, the founder of Catalina. If you like today's video, shoot me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to help support the channel for a couple of bucks an episode, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/LadyKSailing. I will see you guys next week.